October 23, 1942, Henderson Mim. Ahmad, October 23, 1942, Henderson Field, Guadalcanal. The humid jungle air hung thick with the smell of cordite and decay. As Corporal James Mitchell of the 1st Marine Division, 1st Regiment, knelt beside a fallen Japanese soldier near the longer perimeter, his hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from exhaustion after 72 hours of continuous combat. The battle for Henderson Field had begun. Beside the body lay something unexpected, a Type 100 submachine gun, its chrome-plated barrel gleaming in the filtered sunlight. The weapon looked pristine, with distinctive markings and a side-mounted magazine. Mitchell examined the craftsmanship, noted the adjustable sights, the bipod attachment points, the bayonet lug. M1 Garand weighed 11.2 pounds, with bayonet and sling, heavy after months of carrying it through jungle hell. For a moment he considered the trade. Then Mitchell made a choice that would be repeated thousands of times across the Pacific. He set the Japanese weapon aside and kept his gun. That simple decision, multiplied across hundreds of combat situations on dozens of islands, would reveal profound truths about warfare, industrial philosophy, and technological advantage. The Japanese had designed what they believed was an advanced automatic weapon. It was lighter, fired automatically, carried more ammunition. Yet Marines consistently refused to trade their semi-automatic rifles for these captured submachine guns. Why those Marines understood, instinctively, would take military historians decades to fully analyze. True combat effectiveness came not from rate of fire or perceived modernity, but from entirely different principles. The mathematics of this preference told a story about two fundamentally different approaches to warfare. One prioritized theoretical advancement over practical reliability. The other chose proven effectiveness over innovation. In jungle combat, where weapon failure meant death, that choice proved decisive. The story begins not with confrontation, but with parallel development across two oceans and two radically different military philosophies. In January 1936, after years of testing and debate, the United States Army officially adopted the M1 Garand as its standard. This adoption represented a revolutionary moment in military history. For the first time, a major military power would equip its entire front line infantry with semi-automatic rifles rather than bolt-action weapons. The path to this adoption had been neither smooth nor certain. Canadian-born engineer John Canna's Garand had joined Springfield Armory in Massachusetts in 1919, bringing with him ideas about gas-operated rifle actions that would transform infantry warfare. Garand was a meticulous designer, a perfectionist who understood both mechanical engineering and the practical requirements of military service. His early designs failed testing. Ammunition changes forced complete redesigns. Army brass questioned whether soldiers needed semi-automatic fire. Budget constraints threatened the entire program, but Garand persisted, refining his design through the 1920s and early 1930s. His rifle used a gas-operated bolt action. When fired, expanding gases were tapped from the barrel through a port, driving a piston that operated the bolt. The bolt rotatetto unlock extracted the spent cartridge, ejected it, and loaded a fresh round from an 8-round en-bloc clip. The entire cycle occurred in fractions of a second, allowing a skilled rifleman to fire as fast as he could, pull the trigger while maintaining picture and aim. The M1 Garand fired the powerful 306 Springfield cartridge, the same ammunition used in the bolt-action M1903 Springfield rifle. This .30 caliber round had been standardized in 1906, hence the designation .6. It fired a 150-grain bullet at approximately 285 feet/s, generating approximately 2,650 ft-lb of muzzle energy. This gave the round tremendous range, penetration, and stopping power. The decision to maintain this caliber ensured ammunition compatibility across the entire arsenal and preserved the lethality that American military planners demanded. The rifle itself weighed 9.5 pounds unloaded, 11.2 pounds with a loaded clip, bayonet, and sling. It measured 43.6 in total length with a 24 inches barrel. The walnut stock and steel construction made it robust and durable. The adjustable rear aperture sight allowed precise shooting at varying ranges. The weapon could effectively engage targets beyond 500 eyed and trained hands, though most combat occurred at much closer ranges. General George Smith Patton would famously call it the greatest battle implement ever devised. This praise came in a letter to Major General Levon Campbell, Chief of Ordnance, on January 26, 1945, but in 1942, as the 1st Marine Division landed on Guadalcanal in August, this praise remained. Many Marines still carried M1 903 Springfield bolt-action rifles. The M1 Garand remained in relatively short supply. Production had ramped up slowly. The Marine Corps had deliberately chosen a phased implementation policy, equipping rear echelon units first while they evaluated the rifle's performance in harsh amphibious conditions. Yet those Marines who had received Garands quickly developed fierce loyalty to the weapon. They discovered that when they pulled the trigger, it fired. When they aimed at an enemy, if they did their part, the weapon would do its part. When they hit an enemy with the 30-06 round, he went down and stayed down. Meanwhile, across the Pacific, Japan had followed a completely different path in weapons development. Throughout the 1930s, Japanese military doctrine emphasized three elements: rifle marksmanship at long range, bayonet charges at close range, machine gun support for both. The concept of a submachine gun, a weapon firing pistol-caliber ammunition at high rates of fire, found little favor with Japanese military planners steeped in traditions dating back centuries. The Japanese army had purchased small quantities of European Submachine guns in the 1920s and early 1930s, approximately 445 to 500. Sig Bergmann 1920 submachine guns, a Swiss-made weapon based on the German MP-18 design, entered Japanese service. These fired 7.63x 25mm Mauser cartridges. A small number of Austrian-made Solon S100 submachine guns also saw limited use. These weapons were examined, tested, and largely dismissed as niche tools, unsuited to Japanese tactical doctrine. This began to change dramatically in 1937, when Japanese forces encountered Chinese troops using submachine guns effectively. During the Second Sino-Japanese War, the Battle of Shanghai, which raged from August 13 through November 26, 1937, proved particularly instructive. In the dense urban environment, Chinese Celeste armed with various submachine guns could lay down devastating close-range fire during street fighting. Japanese infantry, armed primarily with bolt-action Type 38 rifles, found themselves outgunned in building-to-building combat. The shock of Shanghai forced Japanese military planners to reconsider. In August 1937, immediately after experiencing the effectiveness of Chinese submachine guns in urban combat, the Imperial Japanese Army initiated development of their own submachine gun. Lieutenant General Kajiro Nambu, designer of the famous Nambu pistol, received orders to create a Japanese submachine gun based on the imported Bergmann designs they had studied. Development proceeded through several experimental models. The experimental Model 3 appeared in 1938, followed by Model 3B and 3C variants in 1939. Finally, in 1940, the Imperial Japanese Army formally adopted the weapon as the Type 100 submachine gun, the designation referring to the Japanese imperial year, 2600. The Type 100 fired the 8mm Nambu, officially designated 8x22mm Nambu. This pistol round fired a 102-grain bullet at approximately 1030 feet pulse, generating only 242 ft-lbs of muzzle. This represented less than 1/10th the power of the 30-06 fired by the M1 Garand. The weak cartridge limited effective range to approximately 150 meters under ideal conditions. Though practical combat range proved much shorter, the weapon itself featured a simple blowback-operated mechanism, firing from an open. The cyclic rate of fire varied by model. The early Type 140 fired approximately 450 rounds per minute. The later simplified Type 144 increased this to 800 rounds per minute. The weapon fed from a curved 30-round magazine inserted horizontally on the left side, an unusual configuration that made the weapon awkward to handle and Production of the Type 100 occurred at Kukura Arsenal and Nagoya Arsenal, with weapon designed by Nambu Arms Manufacturing Company. Total production numbers remain disputed due to incomplete wartime records. Japanese military historian Shigo Sugawa documented approximately 10,000 units produced, with nearly 9,000 being the later simplified model. However, some Western sources estimate up to 30,000 units may have been manufactured. though the lower figure appears more credible based on Japanese records. The Type 100 suffered from numerous design flaws that became apparent under combat conditions. The complex bayonet lug and biped mounting system added unnecessary weight and manufacturing complexity. The horizontal magazine made the weapon difficult to fire from cover. The safety mechanism proved unreliable. The rear sight, optimistically graduated to 1,500 meters on early models, bore no relationship to the weapon's actual capabilities. Perhaps most critically, the weak 8mm Nambu cartridge lacked stopping power and penetration. Manufacturing quality declined precipitously as the war progressed. Early production models showed reasonable fit and finish. By 1944 and 1945, with Japanese industry collapsing under bombing and blockade, Type 100 specimens exhibited rough machining, poor welding, and inferior materials. Chrome lining disappeared from barrels. Wooden stocks gave way to crude fabrications. Tolerances loosened to the point where reliability, already marginal, became entirely unpredictable. Distribution compounded these problems. The Imperial Japanese Army never fully embraced the submachine gun conceptually or logistically. Production remained low priority. Most Type 100s went to specialized units. Paratroopers received a collapsible stock variant. Naval Special Landing Forces, Japan's Marines, received limited quantities. Tank crews occasionally carried them. Regular infantry rarely saw them. By the time Marines encountered Japanese forces on Guadalcanal, Tarawa, Saipan, and other island battles, the Type 100 remained a rare curiosity rather than a standard weapon. When Marines did encounter Type 100s, either captured or taken from dead Japanese soldiers, they invariably rejected them after brief examination. The reasons were immediately apparent to combat veterans. At typical Pacific Island engagement ranges of 100 to 300 yards, the Type 100 could not reach targets that the M1 Garand could destroy with aimed fire. The 8mm Nambu round for lead penetrati, even light cover that the .30-06 punched through effortlessly. Dense jungle vegetation that barely slowed the powerful Garand round would deflect the weak pistol cartridge. In close quarters combat, where the Type 100 should theoretically have excelled, practical realities intervened. The horizontal magazines snagged on doorways, vegetation, and equipment. The crude sights made accurate shooting nearly impossible. The unreliable safety led to accidental discharges or failures to fire when needed. Most critically, Marines had no reliable source of 8mm Nambu ammunition. Using a captured weapon meant depending on captured ammunition, a risk no Marine would willingly take when his life depended on his weapon functioning. The M1 Garand, by contrast, offered Marines everything they needed for survival in Pacific combat. The semi-automatic action allowed rapid aimed fire without losing sight picture. A trained Marine could deliver 8 rounds accurately in less than 10 seconds, then reload with a fresh aim block clip in under 3 seconds. The powerful .30-06 cartridge could penetrate Japanese bunkers, destroy light fortifications, and stop enemy soldiers instantly at any practical combat range. Reliability proved paramount in the harsh Pacific environment. The Garand functioned in mud, sand, salt water, and jungle humidity that would have destroyed more delicate weapons. The gas system, while requiring maintenance, proved remarkably tolerant of fouling. The operating rod and bolt could be cleared and lubricated in seconds. Parts were completely interchangeable between rifles. Every Marine knew that his Garand would fire when he pulled the trigger, regardless of conditions. The ammunition supply system reinforced this. The .306 cartridge was manufactured by the millions in dozens of American factories. Every round met strict specifications. Every clip functioned identically. Supply lines, despite the vast Pacific distances, ensured continuous ammunition availability. Marines never worried about running out of .306 ammunition. They never questioned whether a round would fire or function properly. Training created the final advantage. Every Marine learned to shoot, clean, maintain, and repair the M1 Garand during basic training. They understood the weapon intimately. They could disassemble and reassemble it, blindfolded. They knew its capabilities and limitations. They trusted it because they understood it. The Type 100 remained an unknown, Afghan weapon with unfamiliar characteristics and uncertain performance. The contrast extended beyond the weapon's themselves to the vastly different industrial systems that produced them. American industry churned out M1 Garands the Millions, Springfield Armory in Massachusetts, and Winchester Repeating Arms Company produced the rifle under government contract throughout World War II. Production quality remained constantly high throughout the war. Every Garand was completely interchangeable with every other Garand. Every part was standardized. Every weapon was reliable. American mass production represented the pinnacle of industrial capability. Japanese industry, increasingly strained by war, blockaded by submarines, bombed by aircraft, and desperately short Afro materials, produced Type 100 submachine guns in small batches with declining quality. Early production versions showed reasonable finish and acceptable quality. Late war versions revealed rough machining, poor welding, inferior materials, and declining standards. Corners cut in production to increase the output made already unreliable weapons even less dependable. The weapons reflected the collapse of Japanese industrial capacity. This reflected essential differences in industrial philosophy and national capacity. American mass production prioritized standard, interchangeability, and rigorous quality control at massive scale. Every part met specifications. Every weapon underwent testing. Defects were identified and corrected. The system emphasized consistent, reliable output. Japanese production, more artisanal and craft-based in tradition, struggled desperately to maintain any quality standards under crushing war. Resources vanished. Skilled workers were conscripted into combat units. Factories were bombed. Supply chains collapsed. The weapons reflected these catastrophic pressures. Marines understood these differences instinctively through direct experience. When they pulled the trigger on their grenade, it fired. When they aimed at an enemy, the weapon performed. When they hit an enemy, he went down. When they needed to engage targets at 300 yards, the Garand delivered. When their weapon got dirty, wet, muddy, or damaged, it still functioned. These certainties kept Marines alive. The Type 100 offered none of these. It represented an unknown, a gamble, a risk. In combat, Marines never gambled with their lives. The legacy of this choice extended far beyond World War II into subsequent decades of military development. The M1 Garand continued in American military service through the entire Korean War from 1950 to 1953, where it again proved superior to submachine guns in most combat situations. The weapon directly influenced the development of the M14 rifle, which was essentially an M1 Garand modified to use a 20-round, detachable box magazine and capable of selective fire between semi-automatic and full automatic. The core design principles of the Garand, prioritizing reliability, power, and effectiveness over all other considerations, influenced American military small arms development for decades afterward. The Type 100 disappeared into historical obscurity. After the war ended in August 1945, American occupation authorities issued remaining stocks to Japanese police forces, where the weapon's limitations mattered far less than in military. Few examples survive today in museums and private collections. Most were destroyed, lost in the chaos of defeat, or simply forgotten. The weapon remains a footnote in military firearms history, a cautionary example of a design that looked advanced on paper but failed in practice. Modern military historians and firearms experts, examining both weapons objectively, with decades of perspective, consistently conclude that Marines made the correct choice. The M1 Garand represented the pinnacle of semi-automatic rifle development in itself. It combined tremendous power, exceptional reliability, and consistent technicity in a package that served American infantry superbly throughout the war. The Japanese Type 100 submachine gun, while representing a reasonable engineering effort given Japanese resources and tactical doctrines, simply could not compete effectively with the Garand in realistic combat situations. Marines, who consistently rejected captured Type 100 weapons in favor of their M1 Garands, made tactically sound decisions based on practical combat realities rather than theoretical specifications. The cold numbers support these conclusions unambiguously. The M1 Garand played crucial roles in every major Marine Corps operation throughout the entire Pacific Theater. Guadalcanal from August 1942 through February 9, 1943. Tarawa on November 20 through 23, 1943. Saipan from June 15 through July 9, 1944. Plu from September 15 through November 27, 1944. EMA from February 19th through March 26, 1945, Okinawa from April 1st through June 22, 1945. The weapon contributed decisively to victory in every single campaign. Marines armed with Garands accurate consist of tactical success against determined, well-trained, fanatically motivated enemies in the most difficult terrain and environmental conditions imaginable. The Type 100, despite being produced in thousands, made essentially no meaningful impact on the war's outcome. Its limited distribution, design flaws, and persistent logistical problems ensured it remained a curiosity rather than an effective combat weapon. Japanese forces would have been better served by producing additional rifles or machine guns than by investing increasingly scarce resources in a flawed submachine gun design that addressed no real tactical need. Combat experience validated these technical differences in blood. During the October 23rd through 26th battle for Henderson Field, Marines of the 7th Marine Regiment faced massive Japanese attacks attempting to retake the field. In the desperate fighting, Marines with M1 Garands could engage Japanese troops at ranges where enemy rifle fire remained ineffective. The rapid, semi-automatic fire of the Garand allowed individual Marines to break up Japanese assault formations before they could close to effective range. Private First Class Mitchell Paige, manning a machine gun position during this battle, would later receive the Medal of Honor for his actions. When Japanese forces overran adjacent positions, Paige and the riflemen around him held their ground. The M1 Garand's oft supporting riflemen provided the volume of accurate fire needed to prevent the Japanese from exploiting fire breakthrough. Paige himself would later credit the firepower of the Garand armed Marines with helping save his position. Sergeant John Basilone, another Medal of Honor recipient from the same battle, witnessed the effectiveness of the M1 Garand firsthand, though primarily a machine gunner himself. Basilone observed how Marines with semi-automatic rifles could maintain continuous supersys fire, while others maneuvered. This tactical flexibility, impossible with bolt-action rifles, transformed small unit tactics throughout the Pacific Campaign. The evolution of Marine Corps tactics reflected growing confidence in the M1 Garand. Initial skepticism about the rifle's reliability in amphibious operations disappeared after the weapon proved itself in combat. By the time of Operation Galvanic, at Tarawa in November 1943, Marines had developed new assault techniques that maximized the Garand's capabilities. Fire teams could maintain continuous suppressive fire with one Marine firing while another reloaded. The 8-round capacity and rapid reload capability meant that Marines could advance under their own covering fire. The Battle of Saipan in June and July 1944 demonstrated the M1 Garand's effectiveness in varied terrain. From the beaches to the mountainous interior, Marines engaged Japanese forces at distances ranging from point-blank to over 400 yards. The versatility of the M1 Garand allowed Marines to adapt their tactics to each situation. In the cane fields, Marines could engage Japanese snipers at extreme ranges. In the cave sand ravines of Mount Tapak, the stopping power of the 30-06 proved essential for defeating Japanese positions protected by natural fortifications. Captain Louis H. Wilson, who would later become Commandant of the Marine Corps, earned the Medal of Honor on Guam in July 1944. Leading his company in an assault on Font Hill, Wilson personally demonstrated the M1 Garand's capabilities by eliminating multiple Japanese positions with accurate rifle fire. His citation specifically noted his effective use of rifle fire in leading the assault. This represented countless Mylar actions, where individual Marines, armed with M1 Garands, could decisively front tactical situations through superior firepower. The Japanese military's own assessment of American small arms, documented in captured reports, acknowledged the overwhelming superiority of the M1 Garand. A translated Japanese training document from 1944 warned that American semi-automatic rifles could deliver devastating firepower and advised that Japanese forces should avoid rifle duels at extended ranges. The document reckoned night attacks and close combat as the only viable tactics against American rifle-equipped units. Tacit admission of the Type 100's inadequacy. Production statistics from 1944 illustrated the widening gap between American and Japanese industrial capacity. Springfield Armory alone produced more M1 Garands in a single month than Japan produced Type 100s during the entire year. Winchester's monthly production exceeded Joban's total wartime submachine gun production. These numbers translate directly into battlefield superiority. Every Marine infantry battalion possessed more firepower than an entire Japanese regiment, primarily due to the superiority and availability of the M1 Garand. The Battle of Plu from September through November 1944 showcased the M1 Garand's superiority in the most challenging combat conditions. The 1st Marine Division encountered Japanese forces employing new defensive tactics, fighting from elaborate cave systems rather than launching suicidal charges. In this grinding battle of attrition, the M1 Garand's accuracy and penetration proved essential. Mariners-Scald place accurate fire into cave openings at extended ranges, while the 30-06's penetration could defeat improvised armor and fortifications. Private First Class Richard Krause, posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor at Plu, exemplified the individual firepower that the M1 Garand provided. Tovary Marine. When his squad was pinned down by Japanese fire, Krause advanced alone against enemy positions, using his Garand to eliminate multiple enemy strongpoints before being his ability to deliver rapid, accurate fire, while maneuvering would have been impossible with a bolt-action rifle, and suicidal with a short-ranged submachine gun. The Philippines campaign of 1944 and 45 saw limited deployment of Type 100s among Japanese forces, primarily with naval troops defending Manila. In urban combat, where the submachine gun should theoretically have excelled, the weapons proved ineffective against American forces. Marines and soldiers armed with M1 Garands could engage Japanese positions through walls and fortifications that stopped pistol-caliber rounds. The weak 8mm Nambu cartridge failed to penetrate even basic urban cover like wooden doors or furniture that Americans used for protection. Comparative testing conducted by American ordnance experts provided scientific validation of combat experience. At Aberdeen Proving Ground, captured Type 100s were subjected to rigorous testing alongside M1 Garands. The results proved devastating for the Japanese weapon. Accuracy testing at 100 yards showed the M1 Garand grouping shots within 4 in, while the Type 100 could barely keep rounds on a standard silhouette target. Penetration tests demonstrated that the 306 could penetrate over 30 in of pine boards, while the 8mm Nambu penetrated less than 8 in. Reliability testing proved even more damning. The M1 Garand continued functioning after exposure to mud, sand, and water that completely disabled the Type 100. Endurance testing showed the Garand capable of firing thousands of rounds with minimal maintenance, while Type 100s experienced increasing malfunctions after just a few hundred rounds. Cold weather testing relevant for potential operations in northern Japan or Korea showed the Garand functioning normally at -20 F. While the Type 100's open bolt mechanism froze solid. The institutional response to these tests was unanimous. American ordnance officers concluded that the Type 100 represented no improvement over World War I-era submachine guns and was inferior to contemporary Allied designs like the British Sten or Soviet PPSH-1. More importantly, they confirmed that for Pacific combat conditions, the M1 Garand remained vastly superior to any submachine gun regardless of origin. Bettering's accounts from the Battle of Iwo Jima in February and March 1945 consistently emphasized the M1 Garand's role in survival and victory. The volcanic ash of Iwo Jima created unique challenges for weapons maintenance. Yet the Garand continued functioning when more delicate weapons failed. Marines could clear their rifles quickly and return to action. The 27 Medals of Honor for actions at Iwo Jima often cited effective rifle fire in their narratives, testament to the M1 Garand's importance in individual combat actions. Gunnery Sergeant John Basilone, who had earned the Medal of Honor on Guadalcanal, was killed in action on Iwo Jima while leading an assault on Japanese positions. Witnesses reported that Basilone, armed with an M1 Garand after his machine gun was destroyed, continued to deliver effective fire while maneuvering his unit forward. His death demonstrated that even the finest weapons could not guarantee survival, but also that the M1 Garand gave Marinists best possible chance in combat. The final major Pacific battle at Okinawa from April through June 1945 saw the M1 Garand at its peak effectiveness. The 10th Army, comprising both Marine and Army divisions, brought overwhelming fire to bear on Japanese positions. Individual riflemen with M1 Garands could gouge Japanese forces at ranges exceeding 400 yards in the open terrain off southern Okinawa. In the close combat of the shoreline, the stopping power of the 30-06 proved essential for defeating determined Japanese defenders. The Japanese 32nd Army defending Okinawa units equipped with the full range of Japanese small arms, including Type 100s, yet these weapons made no discernible impact on the battle's outcome. American after-action reports barely mentioned encountering Japanese submachine guns, focusing instead on threat posed by artillery, mortar, and machine guns. The Type 100 had become so relevant to Japanese defensive schemes that many units didn't bother issuing them even when available. Ammunition expenditure at Okinawa illustrated American industrial supremacy. Marine and Army units fired over 200 million rounds of 30-06 ammunition during the 82-day campaign, more than twice Japan's total wartime production of 8 Nambu ammunition. Individual Marines carried and expended more ammunition in a single day than Japanese soldiers received for entire operations. This profligate expenditure, impossible for Japanese forces, reflected absolute confidence in unlimited resupply. Post-war analysis by the United States Strategic Bombing Survey confirmed the decisive impact of American industrial superiority in small arms production. The survey concluded that Japan never developed the industrial infrastructure necessary for modern warfare. While Japanese craftsmen could prodesign dividable weapons of reasonable quality, they could never achieve the mass production necessary for global conflict. The Type 100 represented this failure, a weapon that required too much skilled labor to produce too few inadequate weapons. The Korean War from 1950 to 1953 provided unexpected validation of the M1 Garand's superiority over submachine guns in varied combat conditions, when North Korean and Chinese forces employed Soviet-supplied PSH-1 and PPS-3 submachine guns in mass infantry attacks. American and United Nations forces armed with M1 Garands consistently prevailed in ranged fire. The Garands' accuracy and power at extended ranges proved decisive in the mountainous Korean terrain where engagement distances often exceeded Submachine Gun effective range. Marine veterans of the Pacific War who served in Korea noted the similarity between Japanese and Communist tactics, both emphasizing mass assault and close combat to negate American firepower advantages. The M1 Garand, now supplemented with improved ammunition and better maintenance procedures, continued to provide the range and stopping power necessary to defeat these tactics. Marines at the chosen reservoir in November and December 1950, fighting in temperatures that reached 35 Fahrenheit, still functioned when other weapons failed. The Japanese self-defense force established in 1954 notably chose not to retain the Type 100 in any capacity. Instead, they initially adopted American M1 Garands provide through military assistance programs, implicit acknowledgement of the weapon's superiority. Former Imperial Japanese Army officers serving as advisors to the new force specifically cited the M1 Garand's reliability and effectiveness as reasons for adoption. They had learned through bitter experience what worked in modern warfare. Examination of surviving Type 100 specimens in museums reveals Japan's fundamental design compromises. The horizontal magazine intended tolo-prone firing with a long magazine actually made the weapon awkward in every firing position. The complex bayonet mounting system reflecting Japanese emphasis on blade weapons, added weight, and manufacturing complexity for a capability rarely used. That the adjustable rear sight graduated to unrealistic ranges between theoretical design and practical application. Original Japanese military manuals for the Type 100, translated after the war, confused tactical doctrine. The manuals suggested employment at range up to 400 meters, clearly impossible given the weapon's ballistics. They emphasized accuracy over volume of fire, contradicting the submachine gun's fundamental purpose. They recommended single shots rather than automatic fire to conserve ammunition, negating the weapon's primary advantage. These contradictions reflected Japanese military leadership's failure to understand modern automatic weapons. Cost analysis provided another dimension to the comparison. An M1 Garand cost the United States government approximately $85 in 1943. A Type 100 cost the Japanese government approximately 120 yen, roughly equivalent to $110 at wartime exchange rates. The Japanese paid more for an inferior weapon, that required more skilled labor, more scarce materials, and more complex manufacturing. This economic inefficiency multiplied across all military production contract to Japan's inevitable defeat. The human cost differential proved even more significant. Marines armed with M1 Garands consistently achieved favorable casualty ratios against Japanese forces, while exact figures varied by battle. American forces typically inflicted 10 or more Japanese casualties for every American loss, while superior tactics, training, artillery, and air support contributed to this disparity. The superiority of individual weapons like the M1 Garand played a crucial role. Every Marine with a Garand possessed more firepower than multiple Japanese soldiers with bolt rifles or inferior submachine guns. Maintenance requirements illustrated another crucial advantage. The M1 Garand required basic cleaning and lubrication that any Marine could perform with issued cleaning kit. Field stripping for basic maintenance took less than a minute. Complete disassembly for depot-level maintenance rarely proved. The Type 100 required complex disassembly for basic cleaning with numerous small parts that could be lost or damaged. The open bolt mechanism accumulated debris rapidly in field conditions, requiring frequent, complicated maintenance that Japanese forces rarely had time or materials to perform. The spare parts situation reinforced American advantages. Every Marine battalion included armorers with complete part sets for M1 Garands. Any damaged rifle could be repaired quickly or replaced entirely from stockpiles. Japanese forces rarely had spare parts for Type 100s. A damaged weapon became a useless burden. The complex manufacturing meant that parts from different production batches might not interchange properly. This logistical nightmare meant that even minor damage could permanently disable a Type 100. Weather resistance provided crucial advantages in the varied Pacific climates. The M1 Garand functioned reliably in the freezing mountains of northern Luzon, the steaming jungles of New Guinea, the coral dust of Tirana, and the volcanic ash of Uema. Its enclosed mechanism protected critical components from the Type 100's open bolt mechanism exposed the entire action token. Humidity caused rapid corrosion. Sand and dust created immediate malfunctions. Salt spray from amphibious operations corroded exposed steel components within hours. Night combat revealed unexpected advantages for the M1 Garand. The powerful 30-06 cartridge's muzzle flash, while revealing shooter position, also temporarily blinded enemy forces at close range. The distinctive sound of Garand fire allowed Marines to identify friendly forces in darkness. The metallic ping of an ejecting en-bloc clip, often criticized as allotingenemies to an empty rifle, actually occurred amid such battlefield noise that enemies rarely noticed. Japanese veterans interviewed after the war could not recall ever exploiting this supposed vulnerability. The Type 100's muzzle flash and sound signature proved less distinctive and less intimidating. The weak report of 8mm Nambu round failed to suppress enemy forces through psychological effect. The lower muzzle flash made target identification difficult in night combat. The cyclic rate of fire, whether fast or slow, depending on model, consumed limited ammunition supplies rapidly without providing proportional combat effectiveness. Specialized ammunition availability provided additional American advantages. Marines could obtain armor-piercing 30-06 rounds for use against Japanese light armor and fortifications. Tracer rounds allowed fire direction and ranging. Incendiary rounds could ignite Japanese positions. The 8mm Nambu cartridge existed only in standard ball configuration. No specialized ammunition reached frontline Japanese units. This limitation restricted tactical options and reduced the Type 100's already marginal utility. The impact on Small tactics proved transformative. American rifle squads built around M1 Garand equipped riflemen could operate independently with organic firepower. Japanese squads equipped primarily with bolt-action rifles and perhaps one Type 100 lacked comparable capability. This tactical disparity forced Japan's reliance on larger unit operations, making them vulnerable to American artillery and air power. The individual superiority of the M1 Garand thus contributed to operational and strategic advantages. Psychological warfare reports noted the demoralizing effect of American firepower on Japanese forces. Captured Japanese soldiers consistently mentioned the overwhelming volume and accuracy of American rifle fire. The ability of individual Marines to deliver rapid aimed fire created impression of much larger forces. Japanese officers reported difficulty maintaining morale when soldiers understood their weapons' inferiority. The Type 100, rather than boosting morale as a modern weapon, actually decreased confidence when soldiers recognized its inadequacy. Medical supply requirements reflected weapon effectiveness. Marine battalions required relatively modest medical supplies because the M1 Garand's effectiveness meant fewer wounded Marines. Japanese forces required extensive medical supplies because inferior weapons meant more Japanese wounded. Before achieving tactical objectives, the 8mm Nambu's poor stopping power meant enemy soldiers often required multiple hits, increasing ammunition expended and extending firefights that produced more casualties on both sides. Communication intercepts, decoded by American intelligence, revealed Japanese frustration with their small arms. Radio messages repeatedly requested ammunition resupply that never arrived. Officers complained about weapon malfunctions and inadequate firepower. Requests for more automatic weapons went unfulfilled due to production limitations. These intercepts confirmed what Mariner Saab wrote directly, that Japanese forces understood their technological disadvantage but could do nothing to remediate. The surrender of Japan in August 1945 ended the Pacific War before the planned invasion of the Japanese home islands. Operation Downfall. The proposed invasion would have seen millions of M1 Garand equipped American soldiers and Marines facing Japan's forces armed with whatever weapons remained. Intelligence estimates suggested that Japan retained fewer than 5,000 functional Type 100s for home defense. The invasion would have demonstrated on an unprecedented scale the superiority of American small arms and industry. Veterans returning from the Pacific brought unanimous verdict on the M1 Garand versus Type 100 comparison. In hundreds of oral histories, memoirs, and interviews, not a single Marine expressed preference for the Japanese submachine gun. Many recalled examining captured Type 100s out of curiosity. Some remembered test firing them using captured ammunition. None considered using one in combat. The consensus was absolute that the M1 Garand was the finest infantry rifle of the war. The legacy extends to modern military thinking about infantry weapons. The M1 Garand proved that individual soldier firepower delivered accurately at extended range provides decisive tactical advantages. The Type 100 demonstrated that theoretical capabilities mean nothing without practical effectiveness. Modern assault rifles attempt to combine the M1 Garand's power and accuracy with the submachine gun's automatic fire capability. But the fundamental lesson remains that reliability and effectiveness matter more than features. Military museums worldwide display M1 Gar NS as exemplars of successful military rifle design. The weapons remained functional after 80 years, testament to robust construction and sound engineering. Type 100s appear rarely in museums, usually as curiosities illustrating unusual or failed designs. When displayed together, the contrast remains stark. The Garand solid and purposeful, the Type 100 awkward and complicated. Collectors' markets reflect historical judgment. M1 Garand's command premium prices as historically significant weapons that function reliably. Type 100s, when available at all, appeal primarily to collectors of unusual weapons. The few transferable Type 100s in the United States are valued more for rarity than historical importance or shooting capability. Ammunition scarcity makes actually firing them impractical, while .30-06 remains widely available for modern military historians studying the Pacific War consistently condole that American material superiority, including individual weapons like the M11 Garand, proved as decisive as superior tactics or strategy. The ability to equip every Marine with an effective, reliable, powerful rifle created cumulative advantages that no amount of Japanese courage or determination could overcome. The Type 100 represented Japanese military industry's inability to compete in modern industrial warfare. The final verdict comes from those who were there. Marine Corporal James Mitchell, who made that choice between M1 Garand and Type 100 on Guadalcanal in October 1942, survived the war and lived to age 91. Asked decades later about his decision, Mitchell simply said he never considered taking the Japanese gun because his Garand had never let him down, and he knew it never would. That trust, multiplied across hundreds of thousands of Marines and soldiers, helped win the Pacific War. The mathematics were simple. One Marine with one M1 Garand possessed more practical firepower than multiple Japanese soldiers with any combination of weapons. That individual superiority multiple across entire divisions created overwhelming tactical advantages. Those tactical advantages accumulated across dozens of island battles produced strategic victory. The M1 Garand was not just the greatest battle implement ever devised. As Patton stated, it was a war-winning weapon that validated American industrial democracy's ability to outproduce and outfight totalitarian adversaries. When th Marines departed Japan after occupation duty in the late 1940s, they brought their Garands home. Many purchased their service rifles through the Director of Civilian Marksmanship program, keeping the weapons that had kept them alive. These rifles became family heirlooms passed to children and grandchildren with stories of Pacific battles. The Type 100s remained in Japan, most destroyed during occupation, others rusting in forgotten warehouses, unwanted reminders of defeat and technological inadequacy. The comparison between M1 Garand and Type 100 ultimately transcends mere technical proficiency or battlefield performance. It represents the difference between democratic industrial capacity and authoritarian limitations, between pragmatic engineering and impractical tradition, between weapons devised by users and weapons imposed on users. Marines chose the M1 Garand because it worked. They rejected the Type 100 because it didn't in war. That simple distinction makes all the difference between victory and defeat, between survival and death, between coming home and remaining forever on some Pacific island. The statistics of reduction tell their own story of industrial might versus industrial failure. Between 1936 and 1945, American factories produced approximately 5.44 million M1 Garand. Springfield Armory manufactured 3,500,000. Winchester contributed 513,880. International, Harvester and Harrington Richardson would add more during the Korean War era. This massive production occurred while America simultaneously produced Sherman tanks, B-29 bombers, Liberty ships, and every other tool of modern warfare. Japan produced at most 30,000 Type 100s, more likely 10,000, according to their own records. This represented less than 1% of American rifle production for a weapon that was supposed to provide superiority in close combat. The numbers revealed the futility of Japanese efforts to match American industrial output. Every statistical comparison favored the Americans by margins so overwhelming that tactical innovation could never compensate for material disadvantage. The final accounting came in casualties throughout the Pacific War. Marine units armed primarily with M1 Garands achieved kill ratios exceeding 10-to-1 against Japanese forces, while superior supporting arms contributed to this disparity. The individual superiority of the Marine rifleman with his Garand formed the foundation of tactical success. The Type 100 in the few engagements where it appeared made no measurable difference to these ratios. It remained a footnote in battle. Reports that focused on the decisive superiority of American firepower, that choice made by individual Marines like Corporal Mitchell on October 23, 1942, validated years of development, millions of dollars of investment, and revolutionary changes in military doctrine. Every time a Marine squeezed the trigger off his Garand and watched an enemy fall, he confirmed that American military planners had made the right decision. Every Type 100 abandoned on Pacific battlefields testified that Japanese military leadership had failed by providing inadequate weapons for modern war. The story ends where it began, with individual Marines making individual choices based on hard experience. They chose the weapon that gave them the best chance of survival and victory. They chose overwhelming firepower over sophistication. They chose American industrial might over Japanese martial tradition. They chose the M1 Garand, and that choice helped them win the Pacific. At Tarawa, the 2nd Marine Division encountered Japanese force equipped with a mixture of weapons, including limited numbers of Type 100 submachine guns issued to naval special landing forces defending the island. In the brutal 76 hours of combat, these weapons proved utterly inadequate against Marines armed with M1 Garands. The Japanese defenders, forced to fight from fixed positions, could not exploit the submachine gun's theoretical advent in close combat. Meanwhile, Marines could engage and destroy Japanese positions at ranges where the Type 100 could not even reach. The testimony of Marines who fought across the Pacific consistently emphasized the Garands' superiority. Staff Sergeant James E. Burns of the 5th Marine Division, who fought at UMA, later recalled that captured Japanese weapons were viewed as curiosities rather than useful alternatives. Marines might examine captured Type 100s out of professional interest, but none would consider using one in combat. The weak report of the 8mm Nambu cartridge barely audible over the thunder of American 30 OT, 6 Firebem, a joke among Marines who called it the woodpecker gun. Technical analysis by American ordnance expert SWO examined captured Type 100s confirmed what Marines knew instinctively. Reports filed by the Aberdeen Proving Ground after testing captured specimens noted numerous deficiencies. The horizontal magazine position made prone firing difficult and exposed the shooter when firing around corners. The complex maneuvering process required skilled workers that Japan increasingly lacked. The selective fire capability of later models proved useless given the weapon's poor controllability and full automatic. Intelligence reports from interrogated Japanese prisoners reveal their own militaries' lack of confidence in the Type 100. Japanese officers complained about inadequate ammunition supply, with some units receiving only 60 rounds per weapon for an entire operation. Training with the weapon remained minimal, with most troops never firing more than a few magazines before entering combat. The Japanese military's own after-action reports, captured after the war, acknowledged that the Type 100 failed to provide any significant tactical advantage. The industrial mathematics told an even starker story. To produce one Type 100 required approximately 45 man-hours of skilled labor in 1940, increasing to over 60 hours by 1944, as simplified reduction methods actually complicated assembly. An M1 Garand required approximately 9 man-hours of mostly semi-skilled labor, with that figure dropping to under 6 hours by 1944. As production methods improved, American workers could produce 7 M1 Garands in the time Japanese workers needed for one Type 100, and the Garand was infinitely more effective in combat. Supply chain analysis revealed additional disparities. The M1 Garand used commonly available materials that American industry could source domestically. The Type 100 required specialized steel alloys that Japan had to import, chrome that became increasingly scarce, and precision machinery that bombing progressively destroyed. Every B-29 raid on Japanese industrial centers further degraded Type 100 production quality, while American production centers remained untouched by enemy action. The ammunition situation presented perhaps the starkest contrast. American industry produced approximately 47 billion rounds of small arms ammunition during World War II, including over 10 billion rounds of 30-aught. Japanese production of 8mm Nambu ammunition totaled less than 100 million rounds for all weapons using that cartridge, including pistols. Marines in the Pacific could expend ammunition freely, knowing that unlimited supplies would arrive with each convoy. Japanese forces hoarded every round, knowing that resupply wasn't certain at best. Training doctrine reflected these realities. Marine Corps marksmanship training emphasized accurate, aimed fire at extended ranges. Every Marine qualified with the M1 Garand at distances up to 500 yards. The Marine Corps motto, "Every Marine a rifleman," meant that even cooks, clerks, and drivers could effectively employ the Garand in combat. Japanese training 4th Type 100, when it occurred at all, consisted primarily of familiarization than serious marksmanship. Most Japanese soldiers who carried Type 100s had fired fewer than 100 rounds in training. The psychological impact extended beyond mere technical capabilities. Marines developed absolute confidence in their weapons through extensive training and successful combat experience. They knew their Garands would function in any conditions, deliver devastating firepower, and give them decisive advantages in this confidence translated into aggressive tactics, willingness to engage at longer ranges, and superior small units. Japanese forces, conversely, understood their equipment's limitations. Captured Japanese documents revealed pessimism about their small arms compared to American weapons. One Japanese officer's diary captured on Saipan noted with despair that a could kill at ranges where Japanese soldiers could not even return effective fire. This technologicality contributed to the increasing Japanese reliance on suicidal banzai charges. desperate attempts to close ranges where their inferior weapons might prove effective. The medical evidence provided grim confirmation of the weapon's relative effectiveness. Marine Corps medical personnel documented that wounds from .30 OT typically proved immediately with massive tissue damage and hydrostatic shock effects that high velocity and energy of the round created devastating wound channels. Japanese medical personnel treating wounds from 8mm Nambu rounds noted that enemies often required multiple hits to stop with wounds frequently, proving non-fatal if promptly treated. Logistical planning reflected institution understanding of these realities. Marine Corps supply doctrine allocated generous ammunition supplies for M1 Garand equipped units, typically 300 rounds per rifle, as basic load, with unlimited resupply available. Japanese doctrine for Type 100 equipped units allocated only 120 rounds per weapon with resupply uncertain. These allocation differences reflected not just industrial capacity but fundamental understanding of the weapon's roles and capabilities. The story ultimately illustrates atomless truth about military technology that remains relevant today. Advanced is not the same as effective. Modern is not the same as superior. Features do not equal real function. Complexity does not ensure capability. In actual combat, simple, reliable, and powerful beats complex, unreliable, and weak every single time. Mariners endorsed this truth through hard experience. They chose the weapon that would keep them alive and help them win. They chose the M1 Garand. When the last Marines departed Okinawa in late June 1945, after the bloodiest battle of the Pacific War, they carried their Garands. Japanese Type 100 submachine guns littered battlefields across the Pacific, abandoned by their users while were dead, rejected by their captives who knew better, obsolete before they even entered service. The Marines had spoken through their choices. In the crucible of sustained combat, they had chosen reliability over innovation, power over rate of fire, effectiveness over modernity, substancy over style. That choice validated the wisdom of American industrial planning, the foresight of ordnance officers who chose power and reliability over other considerations, and most importantly, the judgment of individual Marines who understood that in combat, the best weapon is the one that works every single time. The M1 Garand was that weapon, and every Marine who carried one into combat knew